The dusty trading post stank of cruelty as Carson McCabe spotted an Apache woman bound in iron shackles, her spirit untouched by the jeering men who mocked her silent dignity. He paid every last coin to the vile trader, then knelt before her with trembling hands, working the lock until the chains clattered onto the wooden floor with a sound like shattering thunder. She rose slowly, her dark eyes burning not with gratitude but with a fierce pride that made every onlooker step back, including Carson, who suddenly felt small and unworthy in her presence. He expected relief, perhaps a whispered thanks, but the woman whose name he later learned was Aiyana simply turned her back on him and walked toward the open desert without a word of farewell. Carson stood frozen, his noble act dangling emptily as the crowd snickered, and the sight of her retreating form planted a barb in his heart that he could not easily remove or explain to anyone later that night. What happened next that very evening would unravel everything Carson believed about rescue, honor, and the terrifying courage required to truly set another human being free from the invisible shackles of expectation. That night, Carson sat alone by his campfire, replaying her silent departure, his mind wrestling with the uncomfortable truth that his rescue had been more about his own need to be a hero than her need to be saved. Aiyana walked until the stars emerged, then knelt on the red earth to offer a prayer of thanks not for her release, but for the strength to refuse yet another man who believed he could own her gratitude forever. When she returned to the remnants of her people, the elders listened to her tale and saw not a rescue but an invitation to a different bondage, warning her that the white man's kindness often wore a hidden collar of expectation. Carson could not shake the image of her eyes, and so he sought the wisdom of a mountain man named Silas, who told him bluntly that a gift given with strings attached is no gift at all but a concealed transaction. He realized that by expecting her thanks, he had not truly freed her, but merely transferred her chains from iron to the heavy burden of his unspoken emotional demand, a revelation that kept him awake for many long and bitter nights. Meanwhile, Aiyana continued her healing journey among her kin, learning to trust her own path again, but the memory of the cowboy's gentleness as he broke the chains remained a stubborn seed beneath the surface of her hardened resolve. One day, an outbreak of sickness swept through the nearby settlement, and Carson, without hesitation, packed his saddlebags with medicines and rode into the territory of the very people whose suspicion he now understood and quietly respected. He left the supplies at the edge of the encampment with a simple note that said nothing of debt or repayment, and then he rode away before anyone could offer him even a single nod of acknowledgement or a meal of thanks. Aiyana found the medicine and recognized the handwriting from the paper that had once wrapped the key to her shackles, and something in her chest tightened with a strange and unfamiliar warmth she could not easily dismiss. She followed his tracks to a lonely ridge where he was camping, and this time she did not walk away. Instead, she sat down across the fire from him, saying nothing for a long while beneath the watchful, uncountable stars. Finally, she spoke in her own tongue, then in halting English, telling him that she was not a thing to be saved or owned, and that, if he wished to know her, he must first forget that he ever held the key to her bondage. Carson listened without interrupting, his heart pounding, and then he replied that he had already thrown that key into the deepest canyon, and he asked only for permission to learn from her, expecting nothing in return but a shared silence. Over the weeks that followed, Aiyana began to teach Carson the names of the stars in Apache, and he showed her how to read the brand symbols on wandering cattle, a cultural exchange that slowly built a bridge where none had existed before. He discovered that her rejection was not cruelty but self-preservation born of unspeakable loss, and that her trust was a sacred territory he would have to earn with a lifetime of consistent, patient, and unconditional respect. The community watched with cautious eyes as the cowboy came and went, never overstaying, never demanding, until the elders declared that the man who had once broken chains had now broken something far more stubborn, their collective distrust. One evening, Aiyana took his hand and placed it over her heart, telling him that a woman who has been traded and bound cannot be won by grand gestures but only by the gentle erosion of fear through daily acts of profound humility. Carson wept then, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of finally understanding that love is not the hero's trophy, but the quiet harvest of a field. One is willing to water for years without any guarantee of fruition. The pair built a life on the borderlands, not as captive and liberator, but as two equals who had traversed the chasm between their worlds by honoring each other's pain and refusing to ever again use kindness as a weapon. Their story spread far beyond the territory, not as a tale of conquest, but as a testament that the deepest emotional wounds can only be healed when the rescuer lays down the role of hero and becomes a humble listener and a steadfast friend. When others asked Carson how he won an Apache woman's heart after she rejected him, he always corrected them, saying that he never won her at all, but rather she had allowed him to become worthy of standing in her magnificent presence. Aiyana gave birth to a daughter they named Nasha, which meant resilient, and she taught the child that the truest freedom is the right to choose one's own path, a right her father had protected not by cutting chains but by letting go entirely. The old trading post where the chains had fallen was eventually reclaimed by the desert, but the couple would sometimes ride past it and remember the moment that one cowboy's lesson began with a silent, devastating rejection that ultimately saved his very soul. And so the legend of the cowboy who was rejected by the Apache woman became a beloved frontier tale about the sacred art of letting go, proving that sometimes the most heroic act is to release what you long to hold and trust the great spirit's unfolding. This emotional journey reminds us that the bravest act of love is not in cutting chains, but in honoring the free person's right to walk away, knowing that genuine affection cannot bloom under the shadow of an unspoken debt. Today, the great-grandchildren of Carson and Aiyana still live in that valley, sharing their story as proof that two worlds can meet not through force, but through the delicate, patient, and often painful dance of mutual respect and true liberation. If this tale of rejection, redemption, and the true meaning of freedom touched your heart, then please show your support by pressing the like button and subscribing to West Old Stories Official for more powerful emotional westerns. Every subscription and every comment helps us continue unearthing these forgotten sagas that reveal the untamed West, not just as a land of conflict, but as a crucible of profound human connection and spiritual awakening. Now we invite you to share your reflections in the comments. Have you ever experienced a rejection that later revealed a deeper lesson? And how did that reshape your understanding of love, respect, and the courage it takes to truly set someone free? And remember, partners, a simple click of the like button and a subscription fuels our mission to bring these timeless stories to a world that desperately needs their wisdom. So join our campfire community and keep the legends alive together.